Hello. So for our episode number 4, we would continue where we left off. So last time we were looking into the preference page, and that page has, as you can see on the UI, I can get the UI out, and you can see the preferences. There is a chart type, that is the line chart, and we have another option to show GPT suggestions. For example, does the user want to see GPT suggestions on the left hand side on the page, or what type of chart does he want to have on the UI when they visit on the finance history page? So I can try one thing, but last time when I worked on it, it did not work. So if I change this to line chart and I say preferences, I get a pop-up saying preferences saved. On OK button, we should be able to go to the database, to the preferences table, and we should be able to see that under my user ID D0, I should be able to see a bar chart. And when I go to the UI after this, I should be able to go to the finance history. I am seeing a line chart. This is definitely considered as a bug, which we will add into, I think we have already added that as a bug into our feedback system. So we can see that bar chart not visible. Yes, that's the one we saw. This has been added and will be worked on in the future. So we'll move on right now on the preferences page, and we'll work on getting that done soon. And once we save the preferences, they will be updated. For example, now if I change it to line chart and save the preference, we have it saved. And then when you go to the database for the preference table, you should be able to see line chart over here. So yeah, that's basically the functionality that we would want. In the future, we would want the preference page to grow with more preferences. One recent change that I see is that we would want to have a unsubscribe to emails option mentioned here, that once the user selects it, it updates the database value to false, and that will restrict the user to get, or not restrict, it will not disturb the user or send emails, unnecessary emails, if they want to be unsubscribed. So that is the preference page. At the moment, the logic is to load the preferences whenever the user visits the page. We will be able to load the preferences from the preference table, and then there are, once based on the data, we would be able to see what the graph type we want to enable, and then if it's a line graph or a bar graph, we'll look into that. And then we'll also have another preference to set show suggestions, and this will allow us to make changes in the DB, and then later on we'll look into implementing that functionality for updating the UI, the sidebar, as well as the later on the email structure, or when we send the batch job, if we are going to send an email to the customer or not. So that this is most of it. And once this is also saving functionality is there, once the user clicks on the save preference button, at that point of time we would call the save preference, and at the save preference we would call the preferences table, and we will do an upsert there if the user ID exists, or if the user has already had saved his preferences before, his or her preferences, then they will be updated. If they haven't have their preferences saved, then this will create a new entry under the user ID. And also we have certain alerts on errors for if we fail to save preferences or we save the preferences. Also, the lookout of this is basically, we at the UI component, this is mostly the HTML that we have, or some people would like to call it a JSX, but yeah, it looks like a JSX because it has those curly brackets in the middle. So in this JSX we would have style component, we would have the values or options to have line graph, bar graph, like this could be a drop down list. And then we would have a checkbox for the suggestions, or that would call the show set suggestions and set graph type methods that we discussed before. And then in the end, on click of this save preferences, we would call the save preferences, which will update the database for us. So this is the preference page that we looked into. The home page is simple at the moment. uh, More simpler to that is the GPT suggestions page. So right now, uh, at the database side, whenever we have a submission, every submission, a latest submission we would have a suggestion column, and that suggestion column would have the latest GPT suggestion that we got from the API. Now this GPT suggestion, we would want to show that as a separate page on the UI. So we would go back to the UI, and when we click on the GPT suggestion here, we would be able to see the GPT suggestions. So for that, we have a page for it, and within that we are going to fetch the latest suggestion. The function to fetch the latest suggestion is, first we have set loading, like for example, where before we are querying to the database, we would want the customer to know that we are loading the suggestion, and then we would get the user associated with the login or logged in user. And then if the user is not found, we would set the suggestion value as please log in to see suggestions, and then we would remove the loading animation or loading functionality there, and we would return. But if we find a user, then we would go to the submissions table of that, and we would get the suggestion column that I just showed in the database for that user ID, and which would be the limit one. That means it would be the latest. In descending order, limit one would be the latest single value that we would want from the database, and we would get the latest suggestion for the user. If we have any error or we do not have any data, then our suggestion gets a message saying that no suggestions found for that user, because maybe that user has just logged in and has not done anything or not submitted any form data. Otherwise, if the data is available, then our suggestion is available, we would pick up that suggestion and save it within our field, and we would end the set loading flag for us. Now the fetch latest suggestion function is called, and then we would have the UI component over here. The UI part of this is basically just a GPT suggestion, the loading flag or loading field, and then later on we would call the get GPT suggestions, and we would pass in the suggestion that we got from the database into the GPT suggestions component. Now we'll go to the GPT suggestions component. In the GPT suggestions component, we have a styling and we have a UI rendering that we are doing here. In this, if the suggestion doesn't exist or we did not pass anything, then we don't do anything about it. Otherwise, we return a style with GPT suggestion as a title or h4 title on it, and then the suggestion that the value from the database that we are getting in. So that way, if you look at the UI, you should be seeing GPT suggestion and the value that we are getting from the database. Now in the future, we might think of formatting this, making it into two separate sections. One would be a short-term suggestion and one would be a long-term suggestion that we want to have for this system. So I don't know if it exists at the moment. Let me see if it exists. Auth enhancement do we have? And I can also check the database. I don't see it in this. Let me check the feedback and look for a feature request. add chat GPT suggestion in email. That's one that we have added. It looks like we don't have it. Or we can do is we can add it in our feedback, and we would be able to say feature request format GPT suggestion on GPT page. And then save it here into two sections, namely short term and long term. Yeah, so we have this suggestion submitted, feature request, and in the database now we will be able to see the feature added in the to-do list. And so we'll go back to the code in the meantime, and this is the GPT suggestion page that we went through. The next page we will go to is the home page. The home page is going to be the one that the user lands in after they log in into the system. So that is visible here. We have the home page on the top, and we will have the icon, StingyHubby icon, and then we'll have welcome message for the user, and then we'll have a sign out button on this. So in the code we will be able to, we have taken all the necessary imports that are associated with the banner, associated with the user session. We have a theme, and then we also are importing the sidebar layout because we want the sidebar available on the home page, so that people can navigate to the different pages. And in the home page we are utilizing the Supabase client. So Supabase client handles the auth mechanism, and also here you have the login and logout functionalities implemented. So for us to handle the logout, we have the Supabase client, and we are using that to call the sign out function in that. And also the function within the functionality, we are going to sync the user to DB. Here our goal would be to get the user and the related information from the session user. So ID, email, and user metadata is being pulled from the session, and the name is being calculated based on that, either the full name or the metadata name that we are passing. So in my case, on the UI, you can see it's my email address, so I would continue to have that. And then if I am not able to sync it with the user or note it down in the users table in my Supabase database, then I will send a failed message that I wasn't able to sync the user. Otherwise, just console.log would be sufficient enough, user sync to database, and we would pass in the email. This functionality, and then on the UI side we would have a StingyHubby banner. That would be the image that we see in the yellow color image that we see on the UI. And then after that we would have a session object saved here, where we would say welcome. A welcome message will be, and header will be there, and it will give us the user sessions email, session users email, that we would be able to display on. And then we would have a button, and that button would have an on click event to handle logout, which we explained before. Using the Supabase client, we would be able to sign out from wherever we are within that button. Within the auth functionality, so this one also is associated with the initial login that happens. So this page functions as a home page as well as the login page. So within this you would have the auth component, and in the auth component you would pass in the Supabase client, you would have the appearance, you would also add a provider. Now this provider let me sign out. So this provider is this link, the sign in to Google. Since we are using OAuth and we are using Google as a provider at the moment, whenever the user clicks on this, sorry, I would go back. Let me go back. Whenever the user clicks on sign in with Google, we reach to a page where Google authenticates, and then I would be able to use my Google account. So in this case, I used my Google account and I'm logged in into as that user. So this provider is the Google provider that gives us the OAuth probability. And then we have one more field, only third party providers. Yes, this is one of the added components that ChatGPT suggested for us to allow us to have third party providers only. And then we have email auth with captcha. Now email auth with captcha, if we go to definition, is a component that we have. In this component we have a captcha. We are using H captcha, and if you look at this UI part of it, you have an email, a password. So whenever a user either signs up or logs in, we are going to provide the email, a password, and then we have this H captcha component or a widget that we can use that will allow us to the system to determine if we are a human or not. The minute details of this I don't have an idea, but as far as I have researched, I find that usually it's the system time as well as the movements of the mouse that are considered as as a differentiator between a bot and a human. And at that point of time, this widget can determine if I'm a human or not and allow me to sign up or sign in into the system. Now, why do we have here on the login? Why do we have this H captcha widget? The H captcha widget is going to give us bot prevention. There are many denial of service attacks that are using scripts as well as bots for logging into the system, creating users into the system, a lot of users, and then overwhelming the system with logins and other activities that the bot or the attacker wants to do. This H captcha restricts others from going ahead without confirming that they are a human, and then after that a user would be able to sign in or sign up into the system. This ensures that bots are not allowed and only humans are allowed into the system. So when we go into the code for this, we are saving the state, we are saving email, password, we are saving the captcha token that we get from the captcha after we get the tick mark, a captcha reference, any messages that we save in the set message. Now when we do sign up, in that point of time we do receive a captcha token, and we have it. If there's an error in the sign up process, then we would have that error saved into the options or the data saved into the sign up function, and then we would go ahead and work on that. Also, we would set the error message. If there are any problems, then we would set message or use the set message function and get the error message. Otherwise, we would say check your email to confirm sign up. Usually also we have one more functionality that whenever we sign up with the email, we would get a confirmation message. This is one more mechanism that is being implemented these days in most of the applications, is that whenever a system wants to make sure it's a human and the email address that is passed is a valid email address, then they would send a confirmation message to the email address and give you a confirmation link. At that, once you click on the link and you come back on the application, you have the token associated with it that you would be able to use for logging. So in the handle sign in function, we would have sign in with password enabled as well, and it will force us to fill in the captcha along with the user email and password, and then we would have the login link enabled for the sign in as well. at times when you're using your personal email. When you're doing third party auth or you're going through Google has already determined that you are a human and a valid user, and hence we will not go through that path of edge captcha. But when you're doing a personal email, personal password, and going into the system, that's when you would go through those two stages where either you would want to have a captcha token, or you would also want to have a email confirmation link along with it, and then you will be put back into the system. Now in on submit button, this is the part or the part of code. It's a form that will help the um, system to go ahead. We would use the email password, and then we would have the set captcha token on verify. So we have a on verify option here in edge captcha, and we would be able to set the token, and then we would be able to handle sign in, or we would have the buttons to sign in and sign up on the submit button. So that's mostly the edge captcha component. Now we can go back to the home page. We come back to the home page, and here we have the sidebar layout. Now the sidebar is a different component altogether, but I think we have 7 minutes, so we would be able to go through the sidebar. So let's go to definition. On the UI, the sidebar is this bar on the navigation bar that we have. So when we go to the sidebar uses icons. So we would have certain icons that we want to see on the UI. So as you can see on the left hand side, we have icons, and then when we hover on anyone, it expands into and gives us the text associated with the icon. So that icons are being imported from the React icons library, and then we have the nav item. So here we would specify whatever links we want to add on the sidebar. We have the update, goals, history, finance expense breakdown, GPT suggestions, preferences, and feedback submission, and the about page as well. So every one of them have an associated width and height. We have the collapsed width and the expanded width. So these two change. So right now the collapsed one is 60 and the expanded is 200. That allows us to expand it. And then at one point we would have an expandable index with the sidebar layout, and we are going to use the session. So we would, whenever we navigate into the sidebar, we would use the session, and we would get the user information. Also, this is something that we want to get for, especially for the field that is at the bottom when we sign. Okay, let me sign in with Google. Once the user signs in with Google, they would have an associated image and name within the sidebar. We have integrated that. We want to later on work on adding more functionalities there, but at the current moment, it gathers the user from the session, takes the name of the user that is displayed. So my full name is displayed on the UI, and then have a avatar as well. Avatar will be the image that I have on Google. So you can see that my image at the bottom here and the Google image that I have are the same. On the UI part, all this functionality is being displayed. So we have an expandable index, and then we have certain paddings associated with it. We have a background color, and we are aligning them center. So all the icons and all the text are with aligned center. And then in the styling component, we have the nav items that we have defined on the top. We have navigation links associated with that, and the display for them is shown over here. And then we have expanded index, and then handle toggle. On click, we would navigate to that page. We would call the handle toggle function and navigate to the page, and they have icons in them. Moreover, we would have another area here which is this is the style section, and then we have the avatar and the name associated with the avatar at the bottom, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much most of the sidebar layout that we see. Now now we come back to the page. We went to the home page, preference page. We have the update finance page. Now update finance page is was a complicated page before, but now in a few days back it has been downsized. Now it's this page just contains a finance form component, and when we go to that component, finance form component, we are at this point of time, the goal of this page is to update the finances and save it in the database for us. So for us to save it in the database, we would need the supervised client, we would need to get the user, and we have a on submit button. So on submit, when we submit this form, first it will check for the user. It will check if the user is not present, then you must be logged in into the to submit the financial data. If otherwise, if the user is present, then what it does is it is calling the get financial advice function, and it is trying to get the suggestion associated with the data being entered. We are assuming that the user has submitted all data within the fields and has clicked on the submit button. So once it has the data, using that data, it is going to get the financial advice. Now this is where ChatGPT component comes into the picture. So in get financial advice, this is suggestions.ts. This is not part of the components. So if we look at it, it is front end utils. This is mostly part of the utilities. So if you look at here, you see the suggestions.ts. This is mostly not going to be a component, it is going to be a utility. In this function, we are going to input, and this is the input prompt that we are going to create. I submitted this financial data, and within this data I am passing all the fields that I filled in the form. Please give me a very detailed short term and a very detailed long term actionable financial suggestion based on an image. There is one image flowchart that is open available on the internet, and a common personal financial advice. Respond in simple user friendly language. So this is the prompt that I am using to get the suggestions from ChatGPT. Now this input is the ChatGPT input. It is logged into the console, and the response is we are using the OpenAPI client and OpenAPI API client, and then in that we are calling the OpenAI API, and then we are creating, or we are using the model GPT 3.5 turbo. At the moment, that is a very budget friendly model to use instead of the GPT-4. So and looking at this, my suggestions are something that are not very processor incentive or intensive. They are just simple suggestions based on the data on which 3.5 can definitely provide. So I'm using that model, and then I'm passing the input that is coming, that I have created, my prompt, as well as the user that I have sent it across for the API. At one point the API will respond, and then because this is the response, we have a await associated with, because asynchronous response we are getting. That response, whatever choices and message and content that we have, will be saved in the GPT response. We are logging it on the UI, and then we are returning it back. If we have any error, we would just display a message saying that GPT error, GPT is temporarily unavailable, please try again later. So this way, whenever a user submits a data into the system, we will call the financial advice. So for now, I will pause this video, and we will put an end to the episode 4 of the StingyHubby and series, and yeah, hopefully you save more, spend less, and live a rich life. Thank you.